Fala, galerinha do CinePOP! Vocês não acreditam quem eu tive a oportunidade de entrevistar. É isso aí mesmo, a rainha, dona do rolê, Angelina Jolie e o elenco de O Grande Van, nova produção original da plataforma Disney+. Para início de conversa, esse filme já é incrível, ele é emocionante, tem uma mensagem poderosíssima e esse bate-papo que eu tive com o elenco, mais a diretora da produção e o roteirista, você vai poder conferir agora. Então, vem comigo, porque olha, gente, a entrevista tá demais. Bora?
Why do they want an angry gorilla anyway?
You're a silverback. He terrifies humans.
You're not terrifying.
So this is for Angelina. The One and Only Ivan is a movie about art, and even Bob the dog says that every one of us is a little bit artsy. What about you? Have you been doing anything artsy during your quarantine?
I feel like I'm really boring. I spend a lot of time studying foreign policy. I'm like a closet.
That's impressive.
But I think my creativity is my kids. I think because I'm being with them and making up stories before bed or just being silly with them. I think really nothing I'm doing, just watching each of them become uniquely who they are. And being around it and going into each of their, whether it be their rooms and talking to them or developing, helping them develop. It's not as much me, but it's my mom was like that. She was always
getting a lot out of that.
Loved seeing other people's creativity.
And Thea, what were the challenges of making a live action movie with animated animals?
So I'll say two things. One is in terms of shooting this movie was very much like simultaneously working on two movies at the same time because of the technical aspect of it. So on the one hand, we started the whole process with the voice actors because the animators needed their voices to begin to be laid down for the animation journey to begin. So we started with that. Then we shot all of our live action stuff. And then we went back in and we shot the virtual aspects of the film, which was whenever we had just animals in a scene together. And those scenes we often revisited. So we went back in and we did them several times just to get tiny, tiny nuances, changes in the actors' voices, changes in their performances, made a huge change to the animators and what they were doing. So in that sense, the technicality of it was certainly unlike anything I've ever done before. And then the other big thing, to answer your question, that we had to monitor, if you like, throughout, particularly throughout post, which is something that a lot of the voice actors were still around with me. And Mike White in particular was monitoring, you said heartfelt, which of course we wanted to capture the heartfelt spirit of the book, which was the most important thing. But there are also some very important big issues captured within the book that Catherine Applegate, for me, just managed to catch a level that meant that when I first read the book with my kids, who were 9 and 10 at the time, Angie, I know you had this experience. They just absolutely loved it and they connected with it emotionally on a level that they really appreciated the journey that these characters go on. And I knew reading it as an adult and as a parent that I was appreciating something slightly different in certain aspects. And so we wanted to monitor throughout. We wanted to monitor the humor, because we always wanted to balance it and keep that aspect going. But not to be afraid of connecting with the emotionality of what is a really very powerful story.
Ellen, this is for you. For you, what reflection can you take from the experience of being part of The One and Only Ivan?
It was a fascinating technical experience, and that's the amazing thing about our job, is that we're constantly being exposed to completely new experiences. as this is, this digital, a press junket, it's the first for all of us. So, that it's amazing. The technique, I was in awe of the technique, the technicalities that Thea had to be, on top of. It was extraordinary. Her work was extraordinary.
Ariana, your character is so mature, and it's so beautiful to see her asking her dad to make the right choice in terms of what is going on with Ivan. Can you please tell me a little bit about this dynamic?
Kids can also make change, and especially as I'm so young, I want to make change as well. So having that moment of the kid talking to the adult of how to help and how to change is a real cool moment. And Ramon is also a great person to play with, so that was cool.
In Brooklyn, have you read the book before you were cast for the movie?
I read it out loud to my brother and my mom, and my brother was really young, and I remember reading it, and I honestly loved Ruby, but I think it teaches us a good lesson about keeping our promises, because, Ruby would have never gotten free if Ivan did keep his promise to Stella. And I think that's something very beautiful. But I love the book so much that I lended it to my best friend, and I told her to read it because it was something so special. And I loved Bob, and because he was so funny. But I also loved the sentiment of love, and how Ivan doesn't care for Ruby in the first place, but even though he doesn't care for Ruby, and then when Stella kind of tells him to keep his promise, or tells him that he has to promise to get Ruby, or he makes the promise to get Ruby out in the wild, he works his best to do that, and that is a lesson that we can all take in.
Bryan Cranston, your character is actually very nuanced, and he's not a bad guy. He's someone who's trying to make ends meet after everything he's been through in his life. And I wanted to tell me a little bit about your character, about his complexity, and how you managed to make this character so likable, even in the middle of this narrative.
Well, it started with Mike's script, which resonated with me, and the plight of not just the animals and their particular emotional journey, but also with Mac. And I met with Thea a couple times before we started shooting, and we really discussed how we'd lay this out. And I too saw him as a man who has flaws, but also is attempting to make things right. Ivan was like a child to him, and so he wasn't about to abandon his child. So he wanted to figure out, how do I embrace the fact that he's now a full-fledged silverback gorilla, and how do I live with that? And so it was to discover those nuances and allow for the character to be vulnerable. So we talked about it, and I pitched the idea that Mac wears a wig, and that at one point the wig flies up and he's bald and it embarrasses him. And I also had a stomach pad to make him a little and that a girdle, so that when he's doing his master thing, that he would be wearing a girdle. And so those kind of things that were personal vulnerabilities that he didn't want people to see. So he was presenting himself as someone he wanted to project, but it wasn't really him. And at the end, then it came full circle. And Thea said, then at the end, we embrace, and he embraces who he truly is and allows himself to show who he really is at the end. No more wig. Allowing himself to be who he is, and he's happy and proud to see that Ivan has moved into the next chapter in his life.
This painting is clearly a sign he wants to be free.
What about Mac? He's taken care of me my whole life. We're family. We're in this together.